Buenos dias, senores and senoritas. I am the Comic Book Mustache. That bandito many of you have known as the guy who's always talking about comic books. But one thing that this mustache does when he's not talking about his weekly funnies is watch a shit ton of movies. And with the Oscar nominations coming out last week, the mustache was able to catch up on pretty much everything that was released in the year of 2014, and I thought it would be fun for a change where I talked about my second love, film. So, right after finishing up my morning constitutional here, a special edition of Comics and Coffee will be coming to you where I count down my top 5 favorite films of 2014 as well as my top 5 most entertaining films of 2014. What's the difference? Well, I'll explain it to you. See what the mustache thinks about films on Comics on the Can. Well, it starts off as Comics on the Can, but Comics and Coffee, the mustache on movies.
Tonight that we got the truck, we're going downtown, gonna beat up the drunks. You're gonna drive, I'll bring the beer. It's a late shift, no one to fear. And ride, I'll ride. And ride, you ride. It's a roundup.
Sorry about that graphic intro before, senors and senoritas. I am feeling much better. And if you're coming to the Comic Book Mustache for the very first time, Comics and Coffee is a segment where I give you my daily thoughts gracing this brain directly as I wake up in the morning as I enjoy my very first caffeinated beverage of the day. These thoughts are perhaps the most sincere and enlightening, probably because I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I begin to make more and more sense as my coffee dissipates into my bloodstream. I would also like to give a very special shout out to my favorite hombre, Mr. Bob, who doesn't really give a fuck about comics, but loves my channel and keeps encouraging me to go on. So with that said, I mentioned before, I have separated my list into my top 5 favorite films of the year, as well as my top 5 most entertaining films of the year. This is because we had some really awesome blockbuster, popcorn, big budget nonsense flicks this year that were actually really good. They have a new sensibility about them, and I think we're about to enter the world where not only will these provide us with escapism and fun at the movies, they'll give us something to think about and be done as really good films. So I separated my list, and I'm going to start it off with my top 5 favorite films of the year. These will be judged on their artistic merits and how well they were put together, and just really the flicks that should be noted for their value in cinema. So, with that, at number 5, Gone Girl. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Like most, I've been a huge fan of David Fincher for many years. Fight Club and Seven came out when I was in high school. The tone and that kind of filter that Fincher uses to convey the actual darkness of his films and the humanity that's depicted in his films has always been something that's piqued my interest. I didn't understand why he chose Gone Girl until halfway through the films when the big reveal with what the fuck happened to Amy happened. Rosamund Pike's performance, top notch, and let's start getting off Ben fucking Affleck's case. He's not the greatest actor in the world, but he's extremely competent. He's a wonderful filmmaker. Doesn't have a ton of range, but for specific parts, the guy does a great job. Also, Rosamund Pike's performance in Amy as a character was this wonderful kind of reversed Hitchcock, femme fatale, villainous, and also on her side at the same time. This can either be taken as the best date movie or the worst date movie of all time. It could scare you into ever wanting to have a relationship, but you can also take it as almost a comedic commentary on relationships and those tics that you start to grow as we stay with each other longer and longer, even though this was blown completely the fuck out of proportion. So, Mrs. Mustache just texted me. Good time to move on to number 4. Grand Budapest Hotel. Yes, Wes Anderson is a favorite of mine. I love the color palettes he uses. I love the ways he's able to take these ensemble casts and have this sensibility and lightheartedness to them while still really taking some cool ideas and some really big issues seriously at the same time. Moonrise Kingdom, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and Grand Budapest were all his newer flicks, and I feel like he's taking this really cool turn where instead of with his earlier flicks taking people in the middle of their life and showing where their earlier selves has brought them to this darkness, he's taking people younger and this childhood adolescence and this really sweetness to childhood and showing us how it turned them into the people that they are today, and looking at things kind of more positively as we get older rather than looking at how our past has kind of turned us into these people who we don't want to be. It's turned us into these people that we do want to be. Cinematography, as always, is beautiful. The miniatures used in this film, especially for the main piece, the Grand Budapest Hotel, where the majority of this action takes place. It was great. It was almost like a Mr. Rogers episode. It was really cool. And every time Ralph Fiennes, or Ray Fiennes, however the hell you pronounce it, said fuck and cursed, holy moly, this mustache was rolling on the floor. Really funny, but also really poignant and meaningful at the same time. Great cast, great cinematography, and I feel like Wes Anderson has really grown. This is his most mature work, whether or not it's my favorite or not. It is definitely his most mature, and also has an R rating and more cursing than we're used to in a Wes Anderson flick. So if you are a parent and you enjoyed Fantastic Mr. Fox, do not watch this one with the kiddies unless you want to hear the guy who played Voldemort and the Nazi who had sex with that lady and then smoked a cigarette when he woke up and killed all those people, cursing a lot. I didn't know that Fiennes had it in him to be this funny, based on especially those two roles that I mentioned before. What a treat. I hope that Wes Anderson is finally recognized at the Academy, whether or not he deserves Best Picture or not. He usually wins awards like screenplay and cinematography and stuff, and he's not even normally recognized for the big ones like Best Picture and Best Director, but he was this year, and I love to see recognition coming where it's due. So, let's move on to number 3. This is a weird one, folks. I've mentioned my love for surrealism in all sorts of art forms on the show before. Under the Skin was a very bizarre movie made by a director who's very near and dear to my heart, Jonathan Glazer. When I was a little mustache, I loved my MTVs, and Jonathan Glazer was responsible for a lot of the videos that kind of developed the aesthetic which I would consider cool, similar to Spike Jonze. Jamiroquai is one of my favorite bands, And what sparked my interest in Jamiroquai was the video that Glazer had directed that we all know for Virtual Insanity. He did some Radiohead music videos. He did a feature a couple years ago called Crazy Beast. And now I feel like he's really developed this insane style for long-term storytelling with Under the Skin. A movie that a lot of people may suggest to you because Scarlett Johansson shows her boobies a lot. If you're watching that movie because you want to see ScarJo's boobs, this is probably not going to be fun for you. It's surreal, it's disturbing. My wife actually walked out of it about halfway through because she couldn't handle it, because it was making her uncomfortable and scared and depressed. It left me with a very unsettling feeling, and that's what it was really supposed to do. I was scared watching this movie. The narrative is kind of all over the place. What happens in it is kind of up to interpretation. But the performances from a lot of the actors, Scarlett Johansson especially, the cinematography and direction from Glazer, and just the ambition and the visuals of this film were such a delight. Under the Skin is not getting recognized by the Academy this year. I'm not surprised because it is super weird, and a lot of times super weird stuff isn't recognized. Mulholland Drive was from David Lynch a couple years ago, and I feel like that's just because Lynch has made such a name that eventually they had to give him the Best Director award because guys deserve it. Hopefully Jonathan Glazer continues on this path just as Lynch did with flicks like Eraserhead, Elephant Man, and then finally making his mark in the mainstream with Blue Velvet. I think we're going to see a lot coming out of this filmmaker. Highly suggest Sexy Beast, and especially Under the Skin. If you're into the weird, if you're into being scared, and you don't care about cohesive narratives in film, but you care more about how you feel when you leave a film, how you feel while you're watching a film, and how it affects and plays and toys with your emotions and turns you into a big puddle of mush that's very confused, very upset, and very disturbed after watching a true piece of art. So, let's take a look at my number 2 for best films of the year. Uno, dos, uno. With the Oscar nominations last week, I was extremely surprised not to see Jeremy Saulnier's Blue Ruin on that list. It hit the festival circuit throughout the year towards the end of 2013, finally getting its release in 2014, but very early on. I believe it was an on-demand, same-day-as-theaters kind of deal, which I think is going to be the future of independent filmmaking. But this movie was made for next to nothing. And I first checked it out because I enjoyed his first flick, Murder Party, which was basically a violent version of The Breakfast Club on a ton of cocaine. This is nothing like that. This, I'm going to be very bold in saying this, I will compare this to the Coen brothers. It felt very much like this filmmaker's Blood Simple, the film that first started the Coen brothers' career. Very simple story of vengeance. A man's family gets killed. The killers get released from prison. He kills them, and he makes a ton of mistakes. Now they're on the hunt for him and his family. Imagine No Country for Old Men if everyone was really bad at killing each other. Beautiful cinematography, amazing, almost picturesque landscapes, simple but effective storytelling, wonderful performances. Definitely a movie to check out that went under the radar when it was released, and I'm very upset and surprised that it's not being recognized for its merits. Coen Brothers, I feel, is an apt comparison, so if you enjoy those darker tone movies from the Coens, such as I mentioned before, Blood Simple and No Country for Old Men, this is an amazing film, extremely powerful. Watch out for Jeremy Saulnier as a filmmaker and all the crew that he's affiliated with. They made this flick for next to nothing, and it was definitely undisputably one of the best films of the year. It's just, you guys have to go see it. People actually have to watch these things in order for them to get the credit that they deserve. So if you're a fan of the Coen Brothers, check out Blue Ruin. You won't be disappointed if you're a fan of those sort of things. So, what was this mustache's #1 favorite film of the year? Let's take a seat on the couch before I brew another cup of coffee and find out. #1. Birdman, or The Unexpected Value of Ignorance, or whatever its subtitle. This film, well, I haven't had a movie take my brain and send it all over the place the way Birdman has in a very, very long time. A movie about a man who left the superhero film industry before its real boom, typecasted and remembered forever for his performance as this Birdman, is now trying to stage a comeback and show his artistic integrity by launching a play that he writes, adapts, and directs and stars in himself based on the Raymond Carter short story, What We Do When We Talk About Love. That's the premise, but in reality, this movie is a very poignant and powerful meditation on existence, on what it means to be real, and what purpose it has to be relevant. It's something you should see for yourself. I was walking around after seeing this film, praying that somebody would bring it up so I can have very deep conversations about it. What does it mean to be real? Where are we real and where are we acting? What does it mean to exist? What is the importance of existence? What is the importance of relevancy? Who cares? And how do we achieve it? There's so much to be said about Birdman. Also, putting on top some meta-commentary as far as Michael Keaton, who played the titular character, Birdman, being, the guy who played Batman and left the role very famously and not being recognized much for his work later and always being remembered as the first Batman, very similar to our character in this flick. Meta-commentary on some of his relationships in real life, not in real life, but the life he's playing, this character he's playing, with the character that he's portraying in the story, What We Do When We Talk About Love, and so much more. It's such a powerful film, and not only is it powerful with what it means and what we can think about the flick, it is such a technical achievement. Back to some meta-commentary. This movie is shot as if it is in one take with a single camera following the actions around. This is me following the actions around. Following the actions around as they occur. Very similar to how a play would be performed in a single take with no mistakes. Some more meta-commentary there. Birdman was a very powerful film, and not only was it my favorite film of the year, it has instilled its place in some of my top favorite films of all time. I have a top 3 list that hasn't changed since I was 19 years old. #1 being Blue Velvet, #2 being Rear Window, #3 being The Dirty Dozen, because that movie makes my dick grow every time I see it because I become that much more of a man, and #4 now being Birdman. The rest is always changing, but this is a concrete list. I love Birdman. I know a lot of people did. I'm happy it's getting the credit that I feel it's due with all of the Oscar nominations and its awards at the Golden Globes that it's already received. Definitely see Birdman, whether you like it or not. It's going to be something that you're going to scratch your head over and twirl your mustache thinking about, and it won't leave you for quite some time. So, I'm going to move on to round 2, where I brew myself another cup of coffee, and I talk about my top 5 most entertaining films of the year. I made a separate list because I feel like your stereotypical summer blockbuster, generic popcorn flick, or big budget, big production company feature film kind of changed this year. We got a sensibility and tone, and we got a lot of films akin to blockbusters by Spielberg and Lucas, and they're not only movies that I can let my brain stay at home while I sit in the theater and shovel popcorn down my throat as a form of escapism, but they're really well made, and I feel like some of them had sort of an indie sensibility to them, and we're seeing a lot of independent filmmakers such as James Gunn taking the reins on big features, which I feel is a risk from these production companies that is working out. So, let's brew another cup of coffee, take a step back into the kitchen, and take a look at the top 5 most entertaining films of the year from the Comic Book Mustache. Fun thing about this list is I get to talk about some comic book movies, which number 5 happens to be Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I was a huge fan of Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America from a few years back. I'm also a huge fan of the television show Community, as well as Arrested Development, and the directors of The Winter Soldier, Anthony and Joe Russo, came from those shows. The action was spectacular, especially for an American film, very gritty and to the point, and I really love how Marvel Studios isn't just making superhero films anymore, they're making genre flicks with superheroes in them. I think that will help the movie industry not run out of steam with the bombardment of superhero films that have been released and the massive amount that will be released. So, let's take a look at number 4. I grew up loving the Planet of the Apes franchise. It warped my fragile little mind and got me into hard and weird science fiction. It looks very dated and cheesy, and who would have thought that rebooting such a campy franchise would spark intellectual thought and be such a provoking film. I feel like Andy Serkis's performance as the 8th Caesar should be rewarded somehow, even if it means creating a new category at these annoying award ceremonies. So, let's take a look at number 3. Ooh, everything about this coffee is awesome, and everything about the Lego movie is awesome. I thought it would be a 2-hour-long commercial, then I saw all the reviews and was like, let's give this a shot. I was in the theater filled with children, which got me nervous. They were quiet the entire time. I got a very entertaining movie with something of a kind of meaning and metaphor that I feel probably sunk in with a lot of kids. It had a really cool twist to it. And what a great movie, what a great animated film, and what a great message to think outside of the box for the fragile little mind of today's youth. What could possibly be at the Mustache's number 2 most entertaining films of the year? Let's find out. Ooga chaka, ooga chaka, ooga chaka. You remember that trailer and you remember thinking, what the fuck is Marvel Studios thinking? This might be their first big flop, but it was not. Guardians of the Galaxy was so much goddamn fun. My wife and I listened to that soundtrack till it beat our asses pink this summer. James Gunn is someone I've been a big fan of for a long time. He wrote a book about Lloyd Kaufman, head of Troma Studios, which I'm a huge fan of. I love Tromeo and Juliet and Slither and everything he's done, and I can't believe that such a juggernaut in the film industry gave this guy $1 billion and said, make a movie about a bunch of superheroes that not even comic book fans know about or care about. It worked out. It gave me what I call the Star Wars Spielberg tingle, where I kind of was like, oh my god, if I was 9 years old, this would be all I was thinking about. I loved it. A lot of times in science fiction films, especially lately, the CGI fight sequences are all at nighttime and it's hard to see things. This was very bright. Its levity and sense of humor was amazing. Even if you don't like superheroes, even if you don't like sci-fi, this was a movie that everyone can and did enjoy. So I'm going to get to my number one. I'm making this list a little bit quicker than my first top 5 films of the year, only because I don't want this to be a gigantic half-hour-long video. So, what could possibly be number 1 if I left Guardians of the motherfucking Galaxy at number 2? Take a seat on my couch and let's check it out. Hollywood throws action films at us like it's a hotcake. And action has never looked as cool, interesting, or original as it does in the Raid's film franchise. The first one really opened up an envelope of kick-ass, amazing stuff no one has ever seen, reinventing how action sequences and fight scenes can be done on film. The second one topped it, front to back. It is a no bullshit, hardcore action movie that just grabs you from start to finish. I think that the filmmaking and action style of the Raid films is something that Hollywood best pick up on, so we stop getting all this generic garbage that we get with action franchises like Taken and Expendables. Even though they're entertaining, nothing looks as cool and brutal as it does in the Raid. If you haven't seen the Raid because it has subtitles and is from another country, you, my friend, are a fucking idiot. Check it out. It's something that all action and all awesome people should really watch. It's the future of a genre in film. So the mustache is back on the toilet, even though he took his morning constitutional this morning. 2 cups of coffee that quickly usually leads to round 2. Electric Boogaloo. Normally, I end my segments with a mustache-related pun, and I'm going to remind you that if you do send in a mustache pun, I will send you a free comic book, no matter where you live in the world, as a gift if I use it as my sign-off. But now, I'm actually going to leave you with a rhyme that my dear, dear grandmother used to tell me all the time as a little baby. Here I sit, broken-hearted, came to shit, but only farted. Alright guys, if you liked the mustache on movies, let me know. I'm going to start actually covering anything superhero or comic book related in these segments. Mustache on movies sounds good, but if you got a better name, send it in. Until next time, I'll be back with more reviews and more stuff on your funny books. This is the Comic Book Mustache saying, adios, bro chachos, and I love you all.